Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast, the go-to platform for entrepreneurs, innovators, and changemakers. I'm your host, Hamlet Azarian. In this podcast, we delve into the world of business, technology, and innovation. We bring you conversations with industry leaders, disruptors, and visionaries who are shaping the future and making a difference. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a seasoned business owner, or simply a curious listener, join us on the journey of learning and growth. Welcome to the Growth Ventures podcast. And now, let's delve into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Growth Ventures with me, your host, Hamlet Azarian. This is the podcast where we delve into the strategies and insights that make a startup successful, and where we explore the considerations every entrepreneur should make before embarking on their own business journey. Today, we have a special guest with us. I'm thrilled to introduce Sean Salas, the CEO of Camino Financial. Sean's journey is one of resilience, innovation, and relentless pursuit of success, not just for himself, but for the underbanked and the overlooked small business owner. We'll be diving into his experience, his strategies, and the lessons he's learned along the way. So whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur or a seasoned business owner, there's something in the conversation for you. Let's get started. Like with every episode, we like to look at our founder's journey. So we'll first be starting in the past. So Sean, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Hey, Hamlet, thank you for having me on the podcast. Really excited to be here talking with you, a good friend and partner. You've seen our journey to and through, but for the benefit of your audience, I'm happy to share a bit of the historical context. And my story really starts from the day I was born. My mom truly inspired my entrepreneurial journey. She was born in Mexico and immigrated to the United States in pursuit of the American dream. Something that I think you and I both have in common, and saw entrepreneurship as her only means of building generational wealth. And my mom really did do that. She opened over 30 restaurants.
That's amazing.
Predominantly in Mexican format. Yeah, she was a restaurateur. I don't think she would call herself that. She'd call herself a scrappy entrepreneur. And she was also the head of household with 6 children. And so my mom was super mom, but aren't all moms. And so really grew up in that entrepreneur environment. I remember my twin brother, we're the youngest of the 6, used to fight over who would get to sleep in her bed at night so we can hang out with her.
By the way, the story of Sean and Kenny, if you're listening, you are going to be a guest in the near future, I hope. You know? But we're going to delve into their story a little bit more because their story is very interlinked. So you should definitely talk about that as well. So yeah, you and your brother were as younger.
Yeah, younger, inspired by her mom. My mom, unfortunately, did lose her business, so that was a character building moment for all of us.
It's crazy, right? Like, got it up to 30 restaurants. Unfortunately, she ended up losing it. I'm sure there were some painful moments and lessons for her that have transformationally changed you guys as well, too.
Yeah. She, it was crazy. She, I think at her peak, she opened over 30 restaurants, but she had at a peak opened at the same time around 16. She actually was a big fan of fail fast and iterate, and she would even change the format of her restaurants. So while her primary format was Mexican, called the Mexicano, she would actually change it to fish and chips, and then she would close quickly if the location didn't pick up. I mean, a true entrepreneur.
Man, she was like the first generation of ghost kitchen. She was in a retail.
I didn't realize she did that until after I went to business school. And I'm like, Mom, when you were applying, you didn't go to Harvard Business School like me, and you were applying textbook, strategic, frameworks that I learned and spent way too much money learning. Well, not way too much money. There was a lot of value in that experience, but nonetheless, I paid up for that experience, and you intuitively figured it out. Kudos to her. So to that point, we moved back to Mexico. I grew up in Mexico for a good chunk of my formative.
How old were you for the listening audience at this point?
So I was 12 years old, and then I lived in Mexico until I was 20, all the way till graduating from high school. But I always had that itch to kind of come back to the United States, re-immigrate, experience that immigrant story and that American dream for myself. And that's exactly what I did. Kitty and I both were lucky enough to get into UC Berkeley, then transitioned our careers into careers on Wall Street in investment banking and private equity. Both of us worked for private equity funds that have an orientation towards investing in overlooked minority communities, predominantly Black and Brown, whether the businesses they're investing in were minority owned or businesses that were impacting these target communities, and learned a lot. Really started transferring my finance knowledge into financial inclusion knowledge, but also equally realized what were some of the limitations of private equity as an investment vehicle into communities of color. And that really just led to a natural progression of, okay, well, if private equity is a suboptimal investment vehicle, what is the right vehicle? And we realized very quickly that given the average size of Black and Brown businesses, in particular Latino-owned businesses, that credit made a lot more sense. This happened to be at the time when the fintech boom was starting to pick up real steam around 20.
At this point, are you guys still at private equity, or have you guys transitioned back to business school, or where are you?
No, yeah, that's a good point. So we both got accepted into Harvard Business School, and so we're lucky enough.
A small feat for two Latinos who lived their high school years in Mexico, went to Berkeley. Now you're at Harvard.
Yeah, we're at Harvard at this point, and now incubating an idea garnered from our experience in private equity. Good point. The benefit of you knowing my story better than me sometimes. Keep me honest here. And effectively, yeah, that's where we incubated Camino Financial. So as you can see, it wasn't a light bulb moment for us. It was a journey, a camino, if you will, paired with our personal conviction, having seen our mom grow and lose the business, to our careers in finance, and calibrating that experience with good timing on the fintech evolution. And yes, a great place to be incubating any good business, which was Harvard.
At this point, because I know in the early years, at least when I went to university, there wasn't like formal incubation. Did Harvard have this already established, or was this very informal?
No, very well established.
Okay.
So I'm a big believer, and I was just saying the overpaying in jest earlier. I would pay my tuition at HBS again and again because I felt I've gotten a very positive return on that investment. And the reality is that, ironically, one of the reasons I didn't go to HBS was to start a business. I actually felt that I got a lot of bad advice, and there's a stigma even in Silicon Valley that MBAs aren't great entrepreneurs. Well, if you look at some of the top executives at the most valuable tech companies, by the way, yes, a lot of them do have MBAs from really great schools, and a lot of them don't. But to say that B schools aren't great ways to incubate great startups is statistically incorrect. So I was pleasantly surprised. I went to HBS really to learn, meet people, and it was always a dream of mine, and take a break, quite frankly. Probably the last break I've ever been able to take in my career. But really was pleasantly surprised with the resources available. And I think some of the biggest resources outside of, yes, formal incubation programs and fellowships that are available to students there, it's also the underlying ecosystem with fellow students that are building great companies too. Some of those
the peers that inspire you, that I'm sure along the years you're still well in touch with, and you'll talk to them and learn from.
Just to name 3 people that are close, that like, these are people that I know that were incubating either right beside me, or I had an opportunity to invest and see their journey from day one, stemming from Harvard. just to say, one is Bitso, which is the largest crypto exchange in Latin America. Another one is Rapid SOS. You may have never heard of Rapid SOS, but when the SOS integration in your phone is all powered by Rapid SOS, okay?
Is it?
And it's done very well for themselves. A third one, to name just three off the top of my head, is Love Pop. I love this one because Wambi Rose is a section mate and a close friend of mine. If it's effectively an impressions company, but they make impressions through origami like cards that come into magic as you open them up. And so if you go to like any, like nice retail locations, whether, it's the Century City Mall or the Hudson Yards in New York, you'll see Love Pop stores there, and please stop by because they're amazing. And Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank invested in them. So long story short, great companies, of which many are unicorns, and that come from this business school ecosystem. So highly recommend it for anyone that's considering building a company and leveraging business school to do it.
So one of the things I'm hearing, at least in this theme in the conversation, is you do an amazing job of being surrounded by people that you and particularly your peers. What is like a valuable lesson that you took away at this period of your time while you were at school that transformed you and changed you?
Valuable lessons. Some valuable lessons is the value of relationships, and how they translate into intangible and tangible, but I'm really focused on the intangible value over the long term. It's been really humbling and to see not only other people succeed, but also how they literally volunteer their time to support you in times of need. And I know at one part of this podcast, we'll talk about near-death experiences and managing through difficult macro environments. And I can't tell you how much I've been able to leverage those relationships during that period of time. And by the way, we talked about fellow peers and students and alums. We haven't talked about the professors. Oh my gosh. I mean, I can't tell you, 3 professors invested in Camino, but also the amount they continue to stay in touch and make themselves available. Send an email within the day, sometimes within minutes, I'll get a response and an openness to schedule a call. And, I graduated in 2015, right? So almost 10 years ago at this point. And it's been great to have that access. I think the second one, it may be, I definitely intended to learn something when I went to business school, but I was pleasantly surprised how much I learned is, I still use a lot of the frameworks and strategy.
Oh man, you love framework. If people know Sean, he loves his framework.
Yeah. We used a lot of them, man, but we work together, and it's just, I just find them incredibly helpful and interesting because I think at the end of the day, yes, there's more of a nod to a science in business. I totally get it. But there is a science too. We need to honor it, being data driven in our decision making process. And I think what frameworks do is we use them as communication tools to put those two things together. That's what frameworks do. And you need to know which framework to use and when. Not
gives you clarity, and gives you focus. The team is rowing in the same direction. All of those.
Exactly. That's ultimately what frameworks do. And I find them incredibly helpful. I do love nerding out about them a lot. And so those would be the 2 biggest kind of learnings or dimensions of value that I've extracted from that experience that I still use to this day.
So when you went to Harvard, did you know you wanted to start Camino, or had the entrepreneur bug hit you yet, or where were you in that process, or you weren't still sure? And then once you got in there, you're like, man, this burning passion I have, I have to solve this problem. When did that passion start kind of coming into fruition?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is I knew I wanted to start a company at HBS. I knew that. I was pleasantly surprised how helpful the HBS ecosystem would be to support that journey. And so, but I knew I wanted to start a company. I actually directly knew the company was going to involve supporting Latino businesses. There's just so much secular growth and unmet demand in the segment that it was a no-brainer to me, let alone I have a personal passion. But you can't, buy a Ferrari with passion. You also need to do it with a good business plan. Not that I would ever buy a Ferrari for that matter, but and so I think that was very important and always part of my North Star journey going into business school.
Okay. So started Camino. We're at Harvard now. We're starting in Camino. What were some of the early challenges you were having kind of getting the business going, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah. So what were the early challenges starting Camino? I think, and I don't mean to say this because I'm trying to promote you. I'm just telling you this because it's God honest truth. Finding product to market fit was the first primary challenge in the business. I think and for the audience to know, full disclosure, I think it clearly noted on your website. We're lucky enough to find Hamlet.
I was actually lucky enough to find you guys, by the way. It was one of those beautiful marriages. I'm like, oh, a startup in Glendale, California. How is this actually happening?
I actually have some money for prominent VCs. So we were lucky enough to find you. I think we knew there was a big TAM, total addressable market. We knew there was a need, but we didn't necessarily know how to reach that market cost effectively, and two, tailor our product for the market. And we always had the conviction never second guess the size of the opportunity and the need, but how you combine that with a product and channel mix is easier said than done. And so I guess that's a good segue into maybe how that worked out. So
in this time in the journey for the audience, this is when Sean and I had met, and I obviously joined Camino, sort of helping lead their head of growth as a consultant initially. And I think on day one they were doing we were doing door-to-door sales, right? What were we doing when I was like,
I mean, there's fun stories to tell in terms of what we were doing, but clearly we were working under this bias in the industry that the only way you can reach the first and second generation Latino market and transact with them with credit in particular, you had to apply an offline strategy. And no one had really ever executed a digital strategy. And so one thing that Hamlet brought to the table, really more as an experiment. I mean, at the end of the day, we're setting hypotheses and experimenting and validating or disvalidating them. And we actually, I think within weeks, if not months max of you joining, we cracked the code very quickly on, there's a big market.
I was like, huge channel here. What are we going to do about this?
Big channel here. And then that got to, okay, so we found how to get to the market cost effectively. But at that point in time, and it's worth noting to everybody, we had a marketplace business model. What that really means is we weren't lending directly into the market. What we were doing is leveraging. We had other lending partners on our platform, on our marketplace platform, and we were effectively connecting or brokering deals through this online channel. But once we started getting real growth, our conversion went almost less than 1% and closer to 0 than 1%. And so what we found is, wait a second. Okay, there's this big market opportunity, a lot of demand, but there isn't anyone that wants to, our lending partners are doing a terrible job lending into this segment. They don't
They're
understand.
validating the pain point. They're validating.
Yeah,
They want to lend to the underbanked.
they don't want to lend to the underbanked. Exactly. And so we always had an eye towards lending, but we never necessarily knew if and when to trigger it. And this clearly made the decision.
By the way, for our listening audience, Camino at this time, how many people are we? We're seed stage, right? We're still in the co-working space. We're plus or 13 of us maybe at this point, or
like between 12 and 15. We had actually just closed our seed stage round in May, May of 2016, and we were like, okay, but we raised that money as a marketplace. And then here we were, like in June, realizing, oh shoot!
All right, raising money. We raised it for
July. Like we need a pivot.
Yeah.
And that the good news is we had $2 million worth of fresh capital, but we said, you know what? We need to pivot this. We need to pivot this now, and we're gonna put one of the $2 million that we have in the bank at risk. And if people don't pay us back, we're out of business in 6 months. And I think we finalized the decision to pivot at the end of August, and we only had a month to execute the migration of the pivot of the business model, like create a lending policy, infrastructure, collection and servicing, and very lean, of course. And we were able to launch within a month of making that decision. And it was then, the rest is history. We were able to really very quickly validate that our conversion went up. Then we had the good but real problem of needing to raise more money because $1 million was going really fast. And, and that, set us on a new chapter in our journey, but at least at that point, we're on to something.
So, I mean, that was a big decision, right? So what do you think gave you the confidence to make such a big pivot that could potentially have put us at harm's way at that time? And how are you able to get everybody on board and everyone bought into that this was definitely the right decision?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When you have 15 people, I believe the burden of communication isn't as high relative to when you have 115 people, which is, disruptive innovation 101, right? Like the bigger you are, the harder it is. One, you're putting your underlying business at risk to disrupt yourself. But two, the bigger you are, the clunkier you are, right? And it's hard to kind of get strategic change into the organization, and creating that agile culture needs to be done from day one, which is why Jeff Bezos calls it day one mentality, right? And I think we have that, but nonetheless, I think our ability to communicate a pivot at that point in time was relatively simple. I mean, we were all very hands-on, looking at the data, coordinating on a daily basis, not subject to meeting calendars, and really, we were all literally crunched up in one remote office space room. I mean,
ID room. It was a little bit bigger than a closet. He's being kind right now.
So I think it was easier then, to be honest. I think it gets harder down the line.
So that decision obviously worked out. That was a big decision, and that led Camino down to the trajectory of growth, where it has now got to a point where Camino is in Mexico City in the U.S., right? So can you talk a little bit about that decision and deciding to go international and opening up another office in Mexico City?
Yeah. So fast forward from that moment, just to set the context of our expansion period, we found product to market fit, which was great. We found a great digital channel, and that would expand into multiple digital channels where we were able to exclusively engage with our members via digitally native, digital only platform for helping them get a loan and graduate them into longer term, lower interest rate credit products as they built their credit history with us. And so it made a lot of sense. Phase 2 of that was the good but real problem of finding more debt capital to scale your business. And that certainly was a challenge, but we eventually overcame that challenge. It took us 2 years to do it. And in retrospect, 2 years to build a credit model, like for someone that's in the business, it's like, yeah, that's about right. But it was very nerve-wracking when you see that demand and you can't service that demand, and you do that over the course of 2 years and need to meet with a lot of people, shake a lot of hands to convince them that this was a credit opportunity worth investing in, yet at a fraction of the pricing relative to what incumbents were doing, and giving people the comfort that you can do that without losing your money. So that was really challenging, but then we were able to get the right structure in place on the capital side to scale. And so really we started doing that towards the end of 2018, and definitely by 2019, we had a really great boom year. Now that said, and I think the 1 year we've had where there were no crazy externalities was 2019. And that gave us an opportunity to really reframe and play some offense on what to do and how to do it. And we saw outsourcing our sales, credit, and eventually other operations to Mexico and eventually Colombia as well, presented a really great opportunity for us to access great talent with high retention rates, give them good to above market compensation, and deliver amazing quality to our customer base. And so we saw that as a real competitive advantage.
This is part of the growth story of Camino, going from the 15 or so employees to the 120 that you have today. And along the way, what's been amazing, at least me now observing from the sidelines, is how you've been able to maintain the culture. Can you talk a little bit about that? How you kept the team agile and nimble and still very committed to ensuring that, at the end of the day, we're putting our small business owners' needs first and ensuring that we're doing everything that could ensure the success of their business.
That's exactly right. So let's start there. We'll talk about agile and day one mentality, which was another dimension of your question, but let's start about putting our members first. So one of the cultural foundations of Camino is really, you mentioned we love frameworks and nerding out on strategy. And so as an outlet for that nerding out, we created these book clubs. Which I'm sure
which was my favorite thing. I don't know why, it was one of my
And so we created this book club, and we would at the end of every session debrief on how does this book apply to Camino. And so one of those books was Delivering Happiness, because and we typically choose books that are relevant to the context of where we are at that point in time. So not surprisingly, around 2018, we chose the book Delivering Happiness by the late Tony Hsieh.
Yep.
And it really touches around building a culture of putting your customer first. And our COO, who is my twin brother and co-founder, Kenny, read that book and was really impressed. He was like, one, I believe in this. And if I'm being true to my underlying belief in putting our members first and creating that culture around that member, which Tony Hsieh had a very strong conviction he needed to do that. And in Las Vegas, he literally moved his company away from, maybe it was Silicon Valley, I think, at the initial phase. Yeah, it was in
It was Silicon Valley, yeah.
Yeah, to Las Vegas, and he brought his people with him, and then built an ecosystem around Zappos in Vegas. And Kenny's like, if I believe in this. If we're going to do this at Camino Financial, literally, it was from one day to another. And we believe that a big part of that ecosystem is going to be Mexico. I need to move to Mexico.
Yep.
And literally within.
And by the way, Sean is already alluding to Kenny, as I asked earlier, his story, and we're going to talk about it in a whole other
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you guys could dig into that part of the experience. And he did. He moved to Mexico. He set up that team from the ground up to now. I think right now in Mexico alone, there's like, I think 90 people. So the great majority of people that we work with are in Mexico, and we make it a point, not that they don't see themselves as a satellite office, but as HQ2, as we call it. And the culture events that we create and the ecosystem that we're a part of in the Mexico City entrepreneur ecosystem is very real. And sometimes I'm very jealous of how much time Kenny gets to spend with that team relative to me. But it's really cool. So that's certainly been a part and dimension of our culture. The other one is really, how do we maintain a day one like mentality and agile? I think, strategically that's where you want to get to. Tactically, how you do it is, I think, where the rubber hits the road. Because everyone's like, yeah, of course I want to be agile and be able to be flexible, this irrespective of the size of my company. And what I have found is a few different things that make that work. One, you need it needs to come from the top, and being accountable to executing the strategy starts not just with me, but everyone at the top. Finding the right support to see that on a day-to-day basis. I think one hire that I probably delayed way too long was our VP of People and Talent. And I would strongly encourage anyone, any company, maybe the point when you cross the 50-person threshold and you have real expectations of going from 50 to over 100 within a relatively short period of time, your first hire needs to be the VP of People. Or your next hire needs to be the hire 51 needs to be your VP of People. And I think
why? What's the big level up that occurs at that moment? Once that
you need to operationalize the strategy around people, and that's a full-time job.
Yeah.
You need to operate growth and marketing, finance, your CFO, right? And your operations, your COO, right? You need to operationalize your people and talent strategy. And whether that person reports directly to the CEO, the COO, that can be discussed and adjusted according to the context of the company itself. But you need a dedicated resource for it. And so I think that's it. And then I think other smaller but extremely relevant things are getting like your EOS, employee operating system, right. You're establishing really great values and norms and reiterating that a la Netflix, maybe not as aggressive as Netflix, but establishing that standard early and reiterating it through actions. And so we actually print out our values and norms and have it on everyone's desk and reassert them every opportunity we have, because we think that it's important that we make it very clear. And it creates a better working environment where we're all rowing in the same direction. And you can identify very quickly the outliers of when someone doesn't fit into that culture. You do your best, and this is a big thing for avoiding that in your hiring process, but inevitably there are people that join that just aren't fit, and you want to have mechanisms through which you can detect that and adjust accordingly very quickly.
That's amazing, man. So thanks for sharing all that knowledge and what you've been able to do that has helped scale and maintain the culture and keep that day one mentality. Now let's kind of talk about the future. Like, what technology are you excited about, or where do you see Camino headed in the next year or two? And overall, just in the market, what opportunities do you see that you're pretty sure it's going to come to fruition, you being a visionary, and you're going to ensure that Camino is able to get there?
Yeah. So we've been working on AI for years now. So I'm not just saying that just because it's convenient to say that. We can talk about some of the evolving use cases around ChatGPT. But before we do that, and you should definitely double click on the ChatGPT stuff a lot more with Kenny, because this is where he's spending a ton of his time in operationalizing the efficiencies of our business and growth strategy. But AI as a core foundation, I think, is important. We've talked a lot about culture. I actually think where most companies that aspire to be data driven and build real AI capabilities fail is around strategic alignment with their people and better utilizing data. What you are going to see 9 out of 10 times is data and decisions being done in silos, and to truly be data driven and build real AI capabilities, those silos can't exist. There needs to be a seamless flow of data, adhering to good data governance and a culture of treating data as a product, right? In order to truly be data driven. That may sound very softy and intangible. I'm telling you right now, that's everything. You don't get that right at the foundational level, then you have everyone arguing about, but why do you have this data and it should be defined this way versus that way?
Yeah.
And you have
it says it on this dashboard that it's this. No, but this dashboard says something else.
Oh my gosh. And that's just on its surface. And you can have more embedded issues around, some architecture questions, where things are getting stored, and then even just slow ability to agree on stuff. And I think I've taken,
like, you think data collection and all of this is, when does it become a real problem? When you start scaling or earlier on? It's better just to set it up correctly from day one and just ensure you maintain it.
Yeah, I think so. I think it can go both ways. I think the underlying point here is, setting the foundation early is always better. I think what I find more often in reality is that people have a lot of data. They kind of understood, like, even as of 10 years ago, that you should better store this data and find a way to use it. I think most people kind of hit that threshold that are serious about these use cases. Where they fail is how they use it and getting people on board and structuring the data at the appropriate times and growing it and defining it and using it in an efficient way across the organization. And because all the infrastructure is there now, like, there's no excuse anymore. And a lot of the infrastructure is there. So this may sound, I'm going to move us away from the abstract and kind of talk now in the context of how we do it at Camino, what I'm excited about. But that abstract intangible element of managing a data-driven organization is super important. That should be your takeaway for everybody. And I'm happy to point you out to literature that's helped us kind of get around that and get smarter about how to, align our organizational structure with our data architecture. Yep. As a step one. If you don't get that step right, nothing else matters. Now, step 2 is, okay, now let's assume you got that step right. What are the use cases in the context of what we're doing? And what we have found is that we're really excited around lending. Of course, the most prominent and obvious use case is, how do we leverage data using traditional and untraditional pools of data to better risk rank and score credit for the underbanked and overlooked. And so what we have found is that our proprietary algorithms enable us to do that more accurately than FICO on a standalone basis, let alone 25% of our borrower base doesn't have a FICO. So that also increases conversion for all those growth hackers out there, higher conversion, lower CAC, ability to grow faster and monetize the opportunity more efficiently. But I also always allude to, this Camino score, is what we call the Camino score, is only one of many different use cases of how we can leverage AI to be more efficient in everything from targeting our members, right, to
Fraud detection, to
fraud detection. based on fraud detection and risk score, you can actually remove or add friction in the journey. It shouldn't be frictionless. A lot of people say frictionless. Well, actually, I may not want frictionless for a certain cohort of borrowers. But now we're getting more intricate, right? Everything was like frictionless, fast. You get the money right away. Well, you can't do that, because if you do that, you will lose your shirt. And a lot of companies that were saying frictionless, you see where they're trading right now in the market. Not, like, I think they'll get past it, and I really do hope they will. But because I think it's good for all of us. But just frictionless at any cost, no, because when you lend money, it does come at a cost, and it will come back and bite you in the tush if you're not careful. And so adding friction when appropriate makes sense, right? And so it's really getting the intricacies of that too. Post-close, how do I, once you close a loan, how do I graduate you into a broader suite of credit products and solutions? How do I have a continuous score model so that I can support you not only in product graduation, but also in sharing insights to you that make you a bigger, better business, right? And you can only do that leveraging AI.
That's amazing. A lot of exciting use cases that you guys are exploring and implementing. Thanks for sharing with the audience. Sean, thank you for taking the time. And if the listening audience wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way? Is it LinkedIn, Instagram, or what would be the best way for them to be able to connect?
LinkedIn is the best. You can search for my name, Sean Salas, SeanSalas. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I do tune in and tune out of Twitter from time to time. So definitely, and then you can always find us at Camino Financial at www.caminofinancial.com.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have that in the show notes below. And that brings us to the end of another enlightening episode of Growth Ventures. I want to extend a huge thank you to Sean Salas for joining us today and sharing his invaluable insights. It's been a truly inspiring conversation. Remember, every journey begins with a single step, and every business, no matter how large, starts as an idea. So keep dreaming, keep learning, and keep growing. Thank you for joining us on the Growth Ventures with Hamlet Azarian. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and can keep pushing the boundaries of the possible. Goodbye for now.